Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. I'm your host, Ellis, otherwise known as Train Man, and this week we have a question that I can't find the source of. Now, once again, if you have a question, you can go ahead and post it down below about the Zombie Train. If you have a question about anything else, you can go post it on this under construction video here, and next week I'll read it aloud on the show and talk about it in real time. But anyway, let's get in character. This was a question asked by Ice of the Blue Lion on episode 229, although I cannot find it. I'm looking at episode 229 right now, and, maybe I just put it in the wrong thing. You know what, let me see if it was on episode 230. Whoops. 230. Let's see. Episode 230. No, I cannot find his comments. That's unfortunate. Because the next one's by him as well, and I left myself just sort of cryptic things here. So, he asked, well, the only thing I've written down is the word Madison. I'm not sure I know who that is. Just take a step out of character for a minute. I didn't know about Madison, or I didn't know Madison when I originally wrote The Zombie Train. She wasn't part of the train, and she wasn't even really part of my life at that point. So, anyway, that's why I'm going to say what I'm about to say. So, on the train, throughout the course of the Zombie Train, there were a couple of people, a couple of girls or women really, as I got older, and they got older, that I knew, and that sort of struck my fancy, but nothing ever really panned out. And, the reason for that is, well, there was kind of an apocalypse on, and a lot of people that we found had their own struggles, their own things that were going on in their lives. But the one person that I did have, the reporter, her name is Lost to Time, which is really unfortunate. She is as well. I haven't seen her in a number of years, many, many years, really, since sort of the middle of the war. I don't even know if she's still alive. But there were people that I got very friendly with, and there were, opportunities for me to sort of set up a life like that, and they all came and then went, because running the train, doing what I did was too much for almost anything. My best friends, or you might even say some of my only friends, were the people that were in the cab with me. Those are the people that I spent time with. Those are the people that I spent all my time with. I would wake up, I would run the train, and then I would go to sleep. And that's really all there was time for. It's kind of coincidental that this question was asked on the episode that I created about the leisure, well, the car that we used for leisure. The leisure car, I was going to call it. Because it's just another example of these things that people had, these, whether you want to call them opportunities or love lives or whatever, that I never got to have because I didn't get the chance to know people like that. I might have been the head of the train, I might have been the leader of the group, but aside from the meetings that I had to call, it was rare that I really got to interface with people. It was sort of a weird day when I would address people outside of the train. I'd maybe meet them at the beginning, but a lot of the time it wasn't me doing that. It was my dad doing that. And, he was sort of the onboarding guy, and he would show people around, and I was just the guy who drove the train. I decided where we went, but in the grand scheme of things, what did that mean for our interactions with other people? It meant that we kept schedules, it meant that we figured stuff out sort of the way that we did. And it meant that we were able to do all the things that we did have to do. There had to be somebody planning that out, and yeah, that was me. But the fact of the matter is, that's really the limit of what I did. There wasn't a lot of ordering the crew, or, making deals, or whatever. I might have been the commander-in-chief, but I didn't do a lot of the thinking. I didn't do a lot of the building. I didn't do a lot of the planning, really. those were all other people because I had a full-time job. And, because of that, I didn't do, much of the loving either, you might say. So, it was really just me. It was me. It was, I can't blame it on the people that I came across or the situations that they were in. All I can say is the fact that I was married to my job. And I know that's such a weak thing to say. Especially if you look back before the war, it's like, oh, you're married to your job. Yeah, make some free time. There wasn't the existence of free time. And then once I had settled down and started running the zombie train, from behind a desk instead of behind a backhead, I don't know, I had sort of fallen out of it. I just didn't feel like it. And which is a really weird thing to say, because you think like, oh, you're always going to want love. You're always going to want somebody to love you. And you're always going to want, pleasures, I guess, is one way to put it. But, and yeah, no, I certainly miss a lot of things about having someone. But, what am I to do? Do I spend a lot of time out? No, I still spend a lot of time behind the desk here, even now, even these days. Because it's, the world we live in is not the pre-war world. The world that we face now and that we deal with now and the problems that we have, it's totally different than what used to be. Free time, a lot of the time, doesn't really exist much. Most people I know that got to know someone are people that, knew someone because that was their settlement. And sure, down here in Quonset, there's plenty of people, but I'm not one to go out these days. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll come around at some point, and there's still time. There's still time for me to have a family or whatever. But right now, my place is here, which is, like I've said, in a way, unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. And, I've got a duty. If I felt any less dutiful, I probably would have abandoned the post ages ago, because the zombie train is not the kind of thing where you get a whole lot of praise, not these days. The other days when I would see people and I would see, their smiling faces or whatever cliche phrase you want to use, when we would roll into a place and we'd have the goods these people need, or we'd be the lifeline that they wanted, or reverse those, the goods that they wanted, the lifeline they needed, whatever, whatever that may have been. No matter what, we could tell very clearly, oh, we're making an impact here. It's good. But now, there's a lot of complacency. It feels like the war is over, even when there are still issues, every spring, thereabouts. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say on that subject. It's a dry topic for me. It's something that I've heard. I've heard that general scheme of questions plenty of times before. It's not something that I'm too interested in figuring out, and I've just led myself down that road. So, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I talking about this? There are plenty of other things that I could discuss, but now this is going to be sticking in my head for a while, because it definitely feels like some people are the ones that got away, including the one that got away for me. Can I really pretend I couldn't have had a life on the train? Maybe if Evie had been somebody different than the person that she was, or if, and I say that like I would have preferred somebody that wasn't Evie, and that's not true, because she was a godsend to our crew, and she did things that, none of us could have known, because she had different kinds of experiences that none of us had. Her experience with people, and her experience with just dealing with being on your own, and that survivalism, and dealing with urban areas, too. She gave a lot of insight that we didn't have before, because the only time we really dealt with that stuff, other than, I guess, getting the Constitution, was the Battle of Yonkers. And that's the kind of thing we didn't want to repeat, but she provided insight that we didn't have otherwise. And so, I can't, for a moment, be unhappy with her performance, or her being her, and doing what she was, or doing what she did, and being who she was, and, yada yada. I could go on about that all day. Honestly, I have nothing but praise for the woman. But if circumstances had been different, maybe somebody would have fallen in my lap, and that's really the only thing I could have hoped for. That's really the only thing, well, maybe not now, but back then, certainly, it's the only thing I could have hoped for. And, again, the reason is because I lived in that cab, almost. I would go back and forth from my bed to the diner to the cab to the diner to the bed. And there was no two ways about it. We got downtime when we, ran out of fuel or something, but that was the only downtime that I had, for certain, and even then I was mostly trying to spearhead efforts to get the train moving again. Because what else would I be doing? I was the head of the train. I don't know what else to say. That's just who I was. It's what I did. It's and to effect, it's who I am, still. I wouldn't be head of the company if I didn't want to be. If I wasn't drawing from all that experience and that understanding for what can happen to crews or trains when you're out there. And again, these days, it's not zombies that we're worried about, and it's hardly even, groups of bad guys, quote-unquote, that we worry about. There isn't too much to worry about other than the logistics of things, and it's been difficult to pivot on that. But, just because I was unfamiliar with that kind of operation when we started the Zombie Train or the Zombie Train Inc., doesn't mean that I'm going to give up on that operation now, just like how I was unfamiliar with dealing with a zombie apocalypse when World War Z began. You learn. You learn on your feet, you learn on the job, and I've had the good luck and the grace to sort of have our operation build from 1 train to 2 to 3, to 10 to 20 to hundreds. It was interesting juggling those things when you really had to deal with, okay, we've got, 500 trains roaming the country, more or less, or 500 engines at least, and also hundreds of thousands of zombies unaccounted for, if not millions, that could be around pretty much any corner. You've got to balance those two things, and, I feel like now, these days, despite the fact that we're moving more stuff than ever, we have more trains than ever, it's actually an easier situation than I've been in previously. It's, once before, my life was a whole lot harder. And I talk about free time now. Talk about free time then. There was a brief period where I was sort of, where I was commanding, dozens of trains, while still operating my own, because it felt like the Zombie Train was an integral part of the Zombie Train Incorporated. The Zombie Train was an integral part of the Zombie Train Incorporated. And so then we had this roving headquarters deal. And that didn't work, I learned that. But at the same time, maybe it was that important back then. And then I realized, it's not that important anymore. We don't need this anymore. I'm getting totally off track here, but it was just that transition, it's hard to describe, from being the one guy to being the head of all the guys and not being a guy anymore, really. Not being one of those trains that's out there helping people. And I cannot answer that. Unfortunate timing. I cannot be one of those guys that's out there anymore behind a backhead, shoveling coal or doing whatever, fighting zombies. I'm just not that guy, and my crew, for the most part, really isn't. They aren't those people. Emilio is a trainer. Ian has moved on, and he's been, he's the guy that compiles the rail maps for the entire company now. Evie is head of our, zombie response team. She's the head of basically the fighting corps for the Zombie Train Inc. I guess you'd call it the Railroad Police. And this is a great where are they now, but if you talk about it that way, we've all pivoted from our roles. We all do what we used to do, just on a larger scale. Fighting to fighting, shoveling to shoveling, really. Mapping to mapping, My Uncle Paul, the guy who had the foundry car, now runs, he is the CEO of basically the mini company that oversees all our construction. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I just went a little bit over time here, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave comments. Trainman out.